and to agree on significant measures that can help us to implement change in our society. In November 2013, Transparency International celebrated its 20th anniversary. That in itself is an important milestone, but more so in full comprehension of the reputation and credibility which the organization has earned in such a relatively short space of time. Transparency International is recognized as the premier body fighting corruption across the world. The Corruption Perceptions Index is a universally accepted benchmark, and its publication in each December is a major event. We of the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute are proud to be the national chapter of this global movement. There can be little doubt about the achievements of Transparency International in this period. Transparency International was born out of the frustration and disillusionment of Peter Eigen and his colleagues with their experiences in and dealings with the World Bank and the funding of projects throughout the developing world, particularly in Africa. They saw at first hand the graft and corruption which occurred, and which meant that significant funds earmarked for a country's development projects were channeled into private pockets. At that time, just over 20 years ago, such graft and corruption, bribery, was considered, I quote, a cost of doing business. And in many first world jurisdictions, it was deemed a legitimate expense, business expense, that attracted tax relief. Thanks to the efforts and promptings of those early pioneers of the transparency movement, we now have in many of those first world countries anti-bribery legislation, which recognizes the paying of bribes and receiving of bribes as a criminal offense, even if the national of the country commits those acts abroad. The trend in the growth of such legislation will continue to encompass a wide range of countries. Trinidad and Tobago, it is time to wake up. Permit me to recognize the contribution of our own national chapter and our own pioneers like Reggie Dumas and his colleagues, who initially wooed Transparency International to include us under that umbrella. To date, we are the only Caribbean chapter, and we look forward to welcoming Jamaica imminently and Guyana to the fold, and we shall continue to play our part in encouraging others in the region to join. Caribbean, it is time to wake up. Over the years, we have continued to work to fulfill our mandate and vision for a country and region that are free of corruption. We are grateful to all those individuals who have helped to set us on our path. Former directors and members, some who unfortunately are no longer with us, some who are unable to be here because of ill health. But I must make special mention of 4 past chairmen who continue to work with and mentor us even now. Reggie Dumas, Frank Clark, Boyd Reed, who are all here with us. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here and continuing to support us. And Victor Hart, who is unable to be here, but continues his work as chairman of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. Our current directors are fully cognizant that as we pursue various initiatives, as Josh mentioned, procurement legislation, political party and election campaign financing, we are really building on work that began well over 10 years ago. And now, in advocating change, we, Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, have to be an integral part of that change. And we have to change. We have to be more forceful, more proactive, more efficient. We will change, but we will not compromise our principles or objectivity. We will continue to be non-political and non-partisan, but we have to explore ways to achieve goals more quickly. Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, it is time to wake up. Let me illustrate some ways in which we are responding to that call. We have developed a civil society organization toolkit, a framework and a manual through which we can assist all civil society organizations to establish sound governance structures, bylaws, etc. To enable each one of these organizations and ourselves to function in the exemplary manner which we demand of others in the public and private sector. We have shared the toolkit so far with a wide cross-section of civil society organizations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. But yet we have hardly covered the tip of the iceberg. We must pursue this task more vigorously. We have established a youth arm of Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute with its core at UE, and I'm pleased to see that our committee members are here this morning. Thank you very much for being here. We welcome them, and they are part of our outreach into the 5th and 6th forms of schools and our town hall or community meetings, which we've entitled Plenty Pepper. Still, we must do better. We must actually challenge ourselves to allow them, the youth, to lead us in expanding particularly our public education programs, including the use of social media, and by including all schools and tertiary educations, and quickly. Later today, Jason Stedman, one of our directors, will tell us about plans for our website. We'll also hear later today from Dion Abdul, our vice chairman, who will tell us more about our new and exciting project, the Advisory and Legal Aid Center, ALAC, which we launched in December 2013. I referred earlier to our pursuit of party and campaign funding and procurement legislation, both of which we will explore in more detail later this morning. But allow me a few moments to indicate our renewed sense of urgency on both of these issues. I'll primarily use the example of the procurement legislation. 2 years ago, we had a draft bill that we thought would be laid in Parliament, a draft which was the result of over 10 years of collaboration between ourselves, the JCC, the Chamber of Commerce, the American Chamber, the Local Content Chamber, FETUN, and in discussion with successive governments and oppositions. Recently, however, a new draft has been presented to us. Of course, Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute will collaborate in further discussions on that. We are not so arrogant as to believe that only our draft is accessible or acceptable. But we have identified 5 elements which we consider to be essential to an effective legislative process, and we shall call on all parties to support those agreed elements to ensure the integrity of the new bill. Parliament, it is time to wake up. As I touch on some of the priorities we are addressing, I am reminded that we conduct these and all of our projects and programs with 2 full-time staff. To say that we are challenged by the resources which are available to us would be an understatement. I thank our corporate members, and particularly the J.B. Fernandez Memorial Trust. We could not survive without these sponsors and supporters, and particularly our interns and volunteers. We desperately need to build capacity. Therefore, I make this special plea to the international donor agencies to reconsider your criteria for funding. By and large, the threshold is considered to be per capita income. Low-income countries receive development aid funding. Middle income and higher do not, in the jargon, qualify. However, I believe that funding for anti-corruption work must be considered separately from simply development funding. If we can consider that in general, middle-income countries provide attractive investment opportunities, it is necessary to ensure that such opportunities are not sullied by corruption risks. It is to the mutual advantage of the potential investor country and the potential recipient country to foster a clean environment. Thus, in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, the work of anti-corruption organizations should not be considered in the same vein as development aid, but rather be seen as part of an overall investment strategy that will make the recipient environment compatible with the emerging regime of anti-bribery laws of the donor countries. Corporate sponsors, donor agencies, it is time to wake up. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to change now, starting with ourselves. Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute has to be part of that change. And let me make it simple and use the cricket analogy. I don't mind talking about cricket today because the West Indies have just won a series and are heading off to win the World Cup next month. We have made a solid start to the innings, but it's a test match that we are engaged in. We are in for the long haul. We have played ourselves in, and we now have to move into a more attacking mood. Build innings, build partnerships, those with the widest possible range of civil society organizations, the private sector, youth groups, donors, funders. We have to build partnerships with victory in mind. This test match against corruption is a test match that we must not